Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving headfirst into the world of NIST's risk management framework, specifically the crucial first step, categorization. You ever hear the saying, know your enemy? Well, in the cybersecurity world, categorization is how we size up our systems and figure out what's really worth fighting for.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding the potential damage if things go wrong and figuring out which systems need that extra layer of protection.
Right. Because let's be real, not all systems are created equal. A system holding sensitive medical records needs way more security muscle than, say, the office coffee maker.
Right, absolutely. And that's where the risk management framework, or RMF, comes in. It's a structured process that helps organizations identify, analyze, and most importantly, manage security risks to their systems.
Okay, so for those hearing about RMF for the first time, can you give us the quick rundown? What's the big picture here?
Sure thing. The RMF is all about building a strong security posture, and it breaks that process down into 6 key stages: categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and monitor.
6 stages. Got it. And today, we're focusing on that very first stage, categorization. So it's like laying the foundation before you build the whole cybersecurity fortress, right?
Exactly. Categorization is all about figuring out the who, what, where, and how much of your systems. It helps you answer questions like, what kind of information is stored on this system? How valuable is that information? And what's the potential impact if it falls into the wrong hands?
Okay, so let's say I'm responsible for a system that processes online payments. What kind of impact are we talking about there?
That's a great example. With a payment processing system, you're dealing with highly sensitive financial data. The impact of a breach could be huge identity theft, financial losses, not to mention the damage to your organization's reputation.
Okay, so definitely not a system you want to leave vulnerable. So how does the categorization process actually work? Walk us through it.
It's actually pretty straightforward. First, you need to define the system, clearly identify what it is, what it does, and what kind of information it handles. Then, you characterize the system by analyzing its security needs and vulnerabilities. Finally, you register the system, adding it to your organization's inventory and documenting its security plan.
So define it, characterize it, register it, got it. But how do we actually figure out how important a system is? Is there like a ranking system?
There is, and that's where the concept of impact level comes in. It's basically a measure of the potential harm that could happen if a system is compromised.
So a system processing those online payments would probably have a pretty high impact level.
You got it, because the potential for harm is significant. On the other hand, a system that just stores employee contact information might have a lower impact level.
Makes sense.
Rare.
So higher impact level equals higher security priority. We're starting to see how this whole categorization thing sets the stage for everything else.
Absolutely. And speaking of setting the stage, remember that graphic we mentioned earlier, the one that shows all 6 stages of the RMF? Well, categorization is like that first domino that sets everything else in motion.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. How does categorizing a system actually influence those later stages?
Well, once you've categorized your system and determined its impact level, you move on to the select stage where you choose the right security controls based on that impact level.
So higher impact level equals stronger, more robust security controls.
Precisely. And then you move on to implementation, where you put those controls in place. Categorization also plays a role in how you assess the effectiveness of your security controls, how you authorize the system to operate, and how you continuously monitor it for any changes or emerging threats.
Wow, so it really is the foundation for the entire RMF process. Who knew that figuring out what you have and what matters most would be so crucial? We've laid some serious groundwork here today. Now, things are about to get even more interesting as we explore some specific system types. After all, we don't want to trap our office coffee maker in a high-security fortress. That feels a tad excessive, don't you think?
I completely agree. We'll dive into the fascinating world of enclaves and guest systems when we return. You might be surprised by what you learn.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been getting our hands dirty with system categorization in NIST's RMF, and trust me, this is way more exciting than it sounds. Before we jumped into the break, we talked about impact levels and how they basically decide which systems get the VIP security treatment. Now things get even cooler as we dive into specific system types. First up, we've got enclaves and guest systems. So imagine those high security areas you see in spy movies. That's what we're talking about here.
Well, not exactly spy movie levels, but you're on the right track. Think of an enclave like a VIP area at a concert. It has its own security checkpoint, maybe some extra guards, and restricted access. Only folks with the right passes can get in. Inside this VIP zone, you might have different booths or sections, each representing a guest system.
Okay, so the VIP area provides a baseline of security, but each individual booth or section can have its own level of protection too.
You've got it. That's the beauty of enclaves. They provide those common security services like firewalls, intrusion detection systems. Think of those as your security guards that protect every guest system within that enclave. This way, even if one guest system has a vulnerability, the others are still shielded by the enclave's overall security.
So it's like having a security system for your entire house, but each room can also have its own lock on the door.
Smart.
But why go through all this trouble? What's the advantage of setting things up this way?
Good question. First off, it makes managing security way easier. Instead of applying a million different security controls to each guest system, you handle the basics at the enclave level and fine-tune for individual systems as needed. It's all about working smarter, not harder, right?
Absolutely. Efficiency is key, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. But it sounds like there's more to it than just making things easier for the security team.
You're right. Enclaves also help reduce the attack surface. It's like this. If a hacker manages to breach one guest system, the enclave acts as a barrier, limiting the damage and preventing them from accessing other systems within the network.
Okay, so it's like containing the damage. Even if one part of the system is compromised, the rest remain protected.
Exactly. And finally, this whole enclave setup makes meeting those pesky regulatory requirements a whole lot smoother. By designing enclaves to meet specific standards, organizations can more easily demonstrate compliance and show they're taking security seriously.
Okay, this is making a lot more sense now. We've got our systems neatly organized into these secure enclaves. But not all systems are created equal, right? We were talking about online payment platforms earlier. Those need serious protection. But what about those systems that control things in the real world? Like power grids and traffic lights. I think those are called industrial control systems, or ICSs.
That's right. We're shifting gears from the digital world to where the digital meets the physical. ICSs are those behind-the-scenes systems that keep our world running smoothly.
So they're like the unsung heroes of the technology world. But how do they fit into this whole categorization picture? We're not just talking about data breaches here, right?
Exactly. With ICSs, a security breach could have way bigger consequences. Imagine a cyber attack shutting down a power grid or causing malfunctions in a water treatment plant.
Okay, now that's what you call a high-impact situation. Suddenly that online payment system feels a little less intense.
It's a whole different ballgame with ICSs. These systems often rely on older technologies which might not have been designed with cybersecurity in mind. Plus, they're often spread out geographically, making them harder to secure.
So we're talking about legacy systems, critical infrastructure, and potentially huge real-world impacts.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to approach securing something like that? It seems like a whole other level of complexity compared to our secure enclaves.
You're right, it is more complex, but the good news is the RMF still applies. Just like any other system, we need to categorize ICSs based on the potential impact of a security breach. But instead of just focusing on data confidentiality, we also need to consider things like system availability, integrity, and even the safety of the people who rely on those systems.
So it's not just about preventing hackers from stealing information, but also ensuring these vital systems keep running smoothly and safely. We're talking about preventing real-world chaos.
Exactly. Securing ICSs isn't just an IT issue. It's a matter of national security and public safety. It requires a unique approach, one that takes into account the potential physical consequences of a cyber attack.
This is all incredibly fascinating. We've gone from securing digital assets within enclaves to protecting the physical world through ICSs. It's amazing how interconnected everything is.
It really is. And speaking of interconnectedness, let's talk about the elephant in the room, cloud computing.
Oh, right. Cloud systems. They're everywhere these days. We're constantly uploading, downloading, sharing. But how on earth do we categorize something that feels so intangible? It's like trying to nail jelly to a wall. We'll unpack that head-scratcher when we return for the final part of our deep dive. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've journeyed through the land of categorization in NIST RMF, tackled those secure enclaves, explored the critical world of ICSs, and now it's time to wrangle the cloud computing, that is.
It's funny you mentioned wrangling, because categorizing cloud systems, sometimes it really does feel like trying to herd cats, But it's a challenge we can definitely handle.
I like your style. So before we get too tangled up in the cloud, let's rewind to something we touched on earlier, enclave boundaries. They sound kind of mysterious, like those invisible force fields in sci-fi movies. What's the deal with those?
That's not a bad analogy. Enclave boundaries are all about drawing a clear line. It's about what's inside the protected zone and what's outside. You can think of it like, well, a medieval castle. You've got those massive walls, moats, maybe even a drawbridge, and everything within that perimeter, that's considered secure. But anything beyond those walls, fair game.
Okay, so if we bring it back to the digital world, we're talking about things like firewalls, right?
Mhm.
Those act as those walls, controlling what data can flow in and out of our systems.
Exactly. And just like a castle wall, a firewall needs to be properly configured and monitored to be effective, of course. But it's not just about the technical stuff, though. It's also about having those clear rules and procedures, for who has access to what and how they can access it.
So it's like having guards at the gate, checking IDs, and making sure only authorized personnel can enter.
Precisely. You need that combination, technical controls and administrative processes, to create a truly secure enclave, that is. And here's where it gets interesting, though. Those boundaries. They can be physical or logical. A physical boundary could be something like a locked server room, whereas a logical boundary, that could be a virtual network, the kind that separates your sensitive data from the rest of your network.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But
Uh-huh.
why go through all this effort to establish these boundaries? Is it really that big of a deal?
It's absolutely critical. A poorly defined enclave boundary, it's like leaving the castle gate wide open. It creates vulnerabilities, the kind that attackers can and will exploit.
And in the world of cybersecurity, we know that attackers are constantly looking for those weak points, those gaps in our defenses. It's like a game of cybersecurity chess.
You got it. And the stakes, well, they're high. A successful breach. That can lead to data theft, financial losses, reputational damage, even disruption of critical services.
That's a lot riding on those boundaries.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure our enclaves are, well, Fort Knox level secure? What do we need to consider?
Well, you've got to start by identifying your crown jewels, those critical assets that, well, absolutely need to be protected. What data is the most valuable to your organization? What systems are essential for your operations?
Okay, so we're talking about things like customer databases, financial records, maybe even more proprietary software.
Exactly. Once you know what you're protecting, you can start mapping out your enclave boundaries. Where is that data stored? How is it accessed? Who needs access, and what level of access do they need?
So it's about creating those layers of security, those checkpoints, to
Yeah.
make sure that only authorized individuals can get their hands on those crown jewels.
You got it. And remember, security. It's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. You need to constantly monitor your enclaves, assess your risks, and adapt your defenses as new threats emerge.
This has been an eye-opening deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from understanding the importance of categorization to navigating the complexities of cloud security. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they embark on their own cybersecurity adventures?
Remember, cybersecurity, it's a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly learning, adapting, and staying one step ahead of, well, the bad guys. So stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay secure.
That's a wrap on today's deep dive into system categorization. We've armed you with the knowledge and insights you need to tackle those cybersecurity challenges head on. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep those systems secure.